Alrighty, so today we are now gonna finally talk about teams that made it to MLS Cup, starting off with the loser of MLS Cup, that is the Vancouver Whitecaps, and then tomorrow we finish the moving forward series, talk about Inter Miami, and then we finally can start to do the season preview. I know I've been very late when it comes to finishing these moving forward series episode. I apologize the fact that it's been so late, and part of that is because I've kind of been sick a couple of weeks ago, and I did take a longer pause than I anticipated in terms of finishing these moving forward series episode. But I'm happy the fact that we're almost done with this, and by the end of this week and heading into next week, that's when we're gonna start to do the season preview and look at all 30 MLS team heading into this 2026 MLS regular season. First, let's talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps. So, despite the fact that there was no doubt this was the best season that the Vancouver Whitecaps have ever had in franchise history, of them winning the Canadian Championship, finished with the highest points total that they have ever finished, and them making multiple cup finals in the CONCACAF Champions Cup final and also in MLS Cup. And despite all the good things that, Jasper Sorensen has done to this team, you just kind of had a sense that, could have been even more magical if they would have finished those final with a win. And that one thing I will say about this team is that there's no doubt that this is just not a one-year wonder for this team. I think this team is going to be good again heading into next season, and that's despite the fact that they did lose a couple of key players and are still have a players that is a huge centerpiece of their defense that are kind of still in that unknown category in terms of whether if he is going to be staying with the Whitecaps or joining the enemy of the team that won the MLS Cup. So last season they finished with an 18-9-7 record and finished with 63 points, which is by far the most that the Vancouver Whitecaps have ever had in franchise history. They scored 66 goals last season while giving up 38 goals with a goal differential of plus 28. That is the best in MLS. No team has a better goal differential than the Vancouver Whitecaps has. But despite that, they finished second in the Western Conference. They were actually tied with San Diego in terms of that spot, but unfortunately, San Diego does have the tiebreaker, and that game against FC Dallas on the final day of the season, that one definitely kind of hurts in terms of them having a chance to finish first in that. And I believe if they actually did finish first, if I'm not mistaken, let me just check the points total real quick for last season, because if I'm not mistaken, have they beat FC Dallas on the final day of the season? I think they would have hosted MLS Cup. Yes, they would have. So they would have had 66 points to finish the season. They would have hosted MLS Cup at BC Place. So that obviously it gotta hurt for them, especially with the way that they were heavy favorites in that game as well. But that being said, they did win the Canadian Championship for the fourth straight year, but they did lose to Inter Miami in MLS Cup. Top goal scorer of this team, you got Brian White with 16 goals, followed by Thomas Muller with 7 goals. Who would have thought that Thomas Muller was going to be one of the top goal scored of this team? I mean, I know he has scored a lot of goals doing his legendary career with Bayern Munich, but he's definitely not a guy that I thought was going to make a huge impact when it comes to the goal scoring. Albeit, yes, some of the goals did came from the penalty spot as well. But after that, you got Emmanuel Sabi with 7 goals. Matthew Laporta with five goals. I mean, very often you see a defender in the top goals scoring chart, and then Sebastian Berhalter rounds up the top 5 with 5 goals. Top assist leader, unsurprisingly, it's Sebastian Berhalter, one of the the best deep line playmaking player in this league with 11 assists, followed by Ali Ahmed, who's no longer on this team. He's now with Norwich City with 8 assists. Then you also have Pedro Vite, also no longer on this team. I believe he's now with Pumas with 6 assists. Then you got JC Lingando with 6 assists, and Jaden Nelson, who's also no longer on this team. He's now with Austin FC with 6 assists. Best win of the season, it's got to be the 7-0 win that they had against the Philadelphia Union. So, like I said in my Union Moving Forward series episode, I mentioned that when I talk about this Moving Forward series episode, I'm pretty much just going to carbon copy in terms of what I said in that into this one. And whereas I said that the Union, it's kind of shocking the fact that they eventually won the Supporter Shield, despite the fact that I think they're the first ever Supporter Shield winner to give up 7 goals in a game in a season, and pretty much give up 1/5 of the amount of goals that they conceded all season long in this one game. I mean, you got to also kind of say the same thing about Vancouver. I mean, we know that they are a very, very good team, and we know that they put up a big goals number in some games as well. But I did not expect them to score seven goals against the team that eventually win the support ratio, and especially against the team that has the best defensive record. I mean that really it was a huge surprise like that. I don't think anyone saw that coming as well. And I don't even think Vancouver fans saw it coming with how crazy that they were scoring, and it's definitely going to go down as one of the most memorable night the Vancouver Whitecaps have ever had, and one of the most memorable night the Whitecaps fans had BC plays as well, because that's I think is by far the biggest margin victory that the Vancouver Whitecaps have ever had in franchise history as well. Things are great for the Whitecaps this year when I mentioned multiple times that they've done something that they have never done in this franchise history. I mean, this has been always a team that has been kind of a little bit of the black sheep of MLS and even the Cascadia region, where they have always been pretty bad for most point and haven't really had a lot of playoff success. This was really the year that finally it changed that. But that being said, the worst loss of the season. I mean, again, I probably should have gone with the loss that they had against Dallas. You know that game kind of hurts them in terms of if they have not lost that game, have they won that game against Dallas, they not only would have finished top of the Western Conference, but they would have actually host MLS Cup against Inter Miami instead of the other way around. But in the end, it's got to be the 5-0 loss that they had against Cruz Azul. Even though I know I don't usually want to pick a competition that is not in MLS. I usually pick with in just in MLS, but I just want to pick this because of the fact that with all the great nights that Vancouver has had, and with all the heroic that they had in that CONCACAF Champions Cup run, it just kind of feel like it's kind of similar to what we said about the Columbus Crew, where the Columbus Crew had their share of heroic run during their CONCACAF Champions Cup final run, beating against Mexican team that we don't see MLS team able to do, especially down in Mexico. And it's the same for Vancouver. I mean, those crazy resort against Rayados and Pumas on the road is something that I definitely didn't see coming. But yeah, I mean, in this game against Cruz Azul, I mean, not only the fact that they laid a huge egg in this one, and yes, just like Columbus, it feels like they also fell victim to the revenge kind of curse. The fact that it feels like the team might have developed some sickness before this game, because yeah, they were 4-0 down in that game against Cruz Azul after the first half. Like that game was not competitive whatsoever, and yeah, that's got to be such a shame in terms of just such a historic run that this team had in the Concacaf Champions Cup, by far the farthest that they have gone, and it just kind of ends in a bit of a dud in the final as well. I say July 1st. It actually happened on June 1st as well, so I got that wrong, unfortunately. But in terms of average attendance, 21,806, which is good for 14th in the league. That is actually significantly down compared to last season as well. But remember, last season they did have multiple games where they opened up the full stadium as part of the 50th anniversary celebration that the Whitecaps, of course had, and not to mention they of course got the Messi boost last year as well. I mean, they kind of got the Messi boost again this year as well, but it happened in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. The average attendance we're talking about is in league play, and they didn't play Inter Miami this year in the league. So yeah, despite the fact that the attendance is not as good as last season, when it comes to just overall games in terms of attendance, definitely the attendance is so much better compared to previous year. You definitely see not a lot of empty seats in most games that the Whitecaps, of course, play, and really in the second half this season, especially after Thomas Muller came to this team. I mean, you didn't really see empty seats at all at a Whitecaps fan. That's how much hype that this team has, and especially the Muller signing has I wouldn't say it translates in terms of this team being a super team. I mean, they were already kind of good before the Muller signing, but I feel like the Muller signing just took this team to another level. Something that, again, I feel like if this was the Vancouver Whitecaps, if you would have told me like 5 years ago that this Vancouver Whitecaps team would be such a juggernaut like what they are, and a team that eventually will get a superstar player like Thomas Muller to join the team in the middle of the season, I mean, Whitecaps fans will laugh at you. I mean, Whitecaps fans will think that you're in some this dystopia kind of universe, or an alternative universe, that the Whitecaps are actually good. But here we are. This is what the Whitecaps are right now, and this is going to be kind of how it is heading into next season as well. Looking at MVP of this team, this was a very tough one because, again, Whitecaps. One of the great thing about them is the fact that they have just so many difference maker on this team, and especially I feel like not just the fact that Jasper Sorensen has done a good job in terms of making this team better and getting every ounce of quality this team and then some, but the next man up mentality is definitely real for this Whitecaps team. Like the next man up mentality of every time they suffer a brutal injury, it feels like whoever's the next man up is just as good as the last guy. It really kind of felt like this team is a definition of the fact that the team is the star. So I will say that they do have some key players on their team. I was kind of stuck between either Brian White or Sebastian Berhalter. I even put Thomas Mullen maybe in that category as well because he really uplifted the quality and the of this team when in his arrival. But in the end, I'm gonna go with Berhalter mainly because I mean he did finish as the top assist leader and as I mentioned one of the best deep line like making midfielder in the league and a guy that this season alone has transit his status in terms of now being a regular with the U.S. men's national team. Like I definitely didn't think that was kind of the thing a couple of years ago that one that Greg Berhalter's son would be play a huge part of the U.S. potentially heading into to the World Cup, but that's what he has become. I mean, he has just been an absolute menace with this Vancouver Whitecaps team, and I believe if I'm not mistaken, didn't he also not play in MLS Cup as well? Because I remember Vancouver did miss one significant person in MLS Cup, and again, let me know in the comments below if I'm completely wrong about this. But if he did not play in MLS Cup, I think we kind of saw a huge miss that the Whitecaps had in that MLS Cup against Inter Miami. Disappointment. This one was also tough as well because there's really nobody else in this team. Is very disappointing. So I'm kind of gone a little bit cheap here by putting Daniel Rios in here, even though he's no longer on this team. He's out now with Montreal as well. I mean, the thing about Daniel Rios, he was kind of almost like a placeholder in a way. When Brian White, of course, at times missed times with this team, but yeah, he didn't really do so well doing his time with the Whitecaps. And eventually, it's not a big surprise that they decided not to exercise his option after he was loaned to this team, and now hopefully he can revitalize his career. And I wouldn't say revitalize his career, but also kind of just maybe now bouncing around the league, and now the latest stop of him bouncing around the league is joining CF Montreal for this upcoming season. Young player to watch. This was also another tough one. I mean, this one is probably even tougher than the MVP because there's just so many young players on this Vancouver team that you could definitely say it is young player to watch, and that's another credit to Jasper Sorensen and also the Whitecaps Academy as well. Again, the Whitecaps Academy. I know I've said this a lot with a lot of teams academy, but I just feel like a lot of people. I know everybody said when it comes to what is some of the best academy in the league, everybody always say Dallas or the Philadelphia Union, but a lot of people don't give credit that Vancouver is also one of those teams that have a lot of hidden gems in terms of the players coming out of their academy, and I feel like it's gotten even better, at least especially for this season as well. Of just so many academy kind of product player and so many players even coming out of the super draft that they develop that turns out to be a hit. So in the end, it was kind of tough to decide, but I decided to go with Ryan Alumi mainly because he's pretty much now the backup for Brian White, which again, that might not be a thing that Whitecaps fan would want to see, especially Ulumi. He is still relatively young. There's no doubt that he has high potential as well, but I'm not quite sure if he's ready to really be that guy in case if Brian White does for some injuries like he did last season as well. But there's no doubt that I think he is going to get some more playing time, especially coming off the bench as well. He's a very fast kind of kid as well, and that could be a great weapons for Jasper Sorensen to use, especially coming off the bench and facing against a team that might already be very tired as the latter stage of the game is. So what went right for this Vancouver Whitecaps team? Pretty much everything. By far the best season the Vancouver Whitecaps have ever had, and they can definitely thank Jasper Sorensen for a big part of that. I mean, I have not seen a foreign head coach turn around a team into a juggernaut overnight like what I've seen with Jasper Sorensen. This is by far the biggest turnaround and probably the most surprising turnaround as well. Because coming into this season, I mentioned before, there was a lot of question about the Jasper Sorensen hiring. Yes, Jasper Sorensen did do well in his native country in Denmark, but That's not always a guarantee. I've seen head coaches, especially in the Scandinavian League, has done well in their respective country, and when they come to MLS, it's been a huge dud. But that's just not been the case for Jasper Sorensen. I mean, he has pushed every single right buttons this season, and has just really turned this team into a juggernaut overnight as well. And then, of course, the other thing that went right for this team, they won Canadian Championship again. It's the fourth consecutive year that they won the Canadian Championship. This was a team that for a long time was struggling in terms of winning it. Yeah, and the fact that for a long time the Canadian Championship is either dominated by Montreal or Toronto. It's quite crazy to see that not only that's not the case anymore, but now it's the Vancouver Whitecaps the one that is dominating that, and that's gonna probably continue for at least another year or two because when you look at these three MLS Canadian teams that most likely is going to win the Canadian Championship. Yes, I know I'm excluding some CPL team, and I know some maybe some CPL fans that is watching this video will feel like I'm disrespecting some of their team in their league. But let's be honest. So far, when you look at the Canadian Championship and really going back to over a decade or two now, it's pretty much only won by MLS teams. So I expect an MLS team is going to win again in the Canadian Championship, and the Vancouver Whitecaps is heavy favorites to do that as well. So what went wrong for the Vancouver Whitecaps? So as I mentioned, as great as this season is, as fairy tale of this season is, you just kind of had a sense that it almost kind of felt like a Cinderella story where just such a magical moment, but eventually the shoe has to drop and the carriage turns into pumpkin, and the clock also strike midnight. No, I used too many Cinderella metaphor there, but it kind of was the case with the Vancouver Whitecaps, at least in the CONCACAF Champions Cup final and also in MLS Cup, just unable to get it done. And that have they were able to get it done, they could have definitely won more than the Canadian Championship. Don't get me wrong, winning the Canadian Championship is great and all, and it is silverware, and it gets you back to the CONCACAF Champions Cup again. But it just kind of feel like they definitely could have won more in this one, especially a missed opportunity in terms so winning two other even bigger trophy that can really put the Whitecaps on the map even more with them winning MLS Cup and also potentially winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Speaking of which, yeah, that disaster that they had against Cruz Azul, that is definitely the one game that I think Whitecaps fans will not want to remember. And the same goes for MLS Cup as well. As great as it is in terms of their time of finally able to get past the first round, which is something they have never done in franchise history, and then eventually make this MLS Cup run. That MLS Cup game against Inter Miami. If you watch that game, I know Inter Miami eventually won 3-1, but the scoreline didn't indicate the fact that Vancouver, they really had Miami in that game. Like they were pressing hard in the second half, and I think the key moment that will really haunt Whitecaps fan, and it feels like this is a very Vancouver kind of moment because when you talk about some cities that have cursed sports team, I feel like Vancouver is definitely one of those one, especially with the way that their Canucks in the NHL is not doing very well either. But yeah, the Whitecaps, that moment of them hitting the triple post, literally right after when they got the equalizer against Inter Miami, yeah, that's gonna haunt Whitecaps fan forever because have that went in and the Whitecaps made it 2-1. I don't think Vancouver would have lost that game, and I know it maybe that might make me sound a little bit overreaction in some way because Miami always have difference maker and they always are in the game. But I genuinely thought the tie was turning in Vancouver's favor, especially of how hard they press in the second half, and that if they would have got that second goal, I wouldn't be surprised they would have got that third goal, and we will have a repeat of what we saw earlier this season when Vancouver did beat Inter Miami in the second leg of the semi-final by a score of three goals to one. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, and yeah, that triple post moment again, that is definitely going to be a moment that will haunt Whitecaps fan for a very long time. So moving forward, looking at this team, so I know that this team heading into next season, they're pretty much going to bring all their key players back. There are a couple of key players are no longer on this team. Jaden Nelson and Ali Ahmed are those two players, so they are a little bit depleted on the wing right now. But for the most part, they have done a good job in terms of keeping most of the players. There was a lot of talks of even some of some of the key component of this core maybe be moving on to somewhere else. Andres Cubas had a lot of rumor, especially in Brazil this offseason. And quite materialize. He stayed with this team for now. Takaoka, there was a lot of talk of his contract situation, of whether or not if and get it done. Looks like they eventually did get it done in the end. And then, of course, you have the Tristan Blackman situation. Now, the Tristan Blackman situation, that's kind of the second point with this situation where, have they really kind of fully solved this situation? They've said that he has now reported to the team. And it's also important to note that Tristan Blackman is actually under contract with the Vancouver Whitecaps until 2027. And that's important because I feel like people forget that, it's not like Tristan Blackman, his contract is about to be up this season. He still have another year left in his contract. But what this contract dispute is going on is just the fact that maybe he might be joining the enemy and might be going to Inter Miami this offseason. There's been a lot of talk of that potentially going to happen, but Vancouver just simply says no. They want to keep him. And unlike the Denis Bouanga situation that I talked about in the moving forward series, it feels like Tristan Blackman is happy. The fact that he doesn't want to just leave Vancouver and join Inter Miami, and that is kind of also proven the fact that he actually had joined the preseason training camp that Vancouver has in Spain right now. So I feel like they might have actually now fully solved the Tristan Blackman situation. Yes, there are still reports out there that maybe the deal between him going to Miami can still happen, but for the most part, from what we have kind of here lately, and especially it's been kind of a little radio silence a little bit for the past week of this situation. It feels like maybe they have fully solved this situation, and it's kind of getting to a point where the later this goes, it will be very shocking to see Tristan Blackman leave this team, especially for the season begin. And that's key too, because he is the defender of the year last season. Can you imagine Inter Miami rating the defender of the year and goalkeeper of the year in a single off season? Yeah, I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of outcry out there in the MLS public about Inter Miami that is already been a lot this offseason as well. And then last but not least, they do still have a U22 spot open. I'm assuming they're going to use that for winger depth. Again, losing both Nelson and Ahmed, that's going to really hurt this team, especially with the speed on the wing area. I mean, they do have some good option as well because again, this team is pretty much too deep in every single competition. But ideally, they would love to get some depth in terms of that spot. I would also say that they might be looking for some depth in the number 9 position because with Rio's no longer on this team, Lumi is kind of the only other option at the number 9 spot besides Brian White. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see whether they'll use it. They don't really necessarily need to. They can always wait until the summer as well because, as I said, this team is stacked. I think this team is going to have another good season heading into next year. I don't think last season was a fluke whatsoever. I think this team is going to compete for MLS Cup and look to try to finish the job. But again, one of the thing I've always say about teams that had a great season and especially have a miraculous season like what we see the Whitecaps had. Now that there is expectation, it'll be very interesting to see whether or not if Vancouver do so because this really is the first time I think the Whitecaps team have such a high expectation as what we saw in their franchise history. And with expectation, not every single team have always meet those expectations. I'm very interested to see what Jasper Sorensen does in his second year, and I'm very interested to see whether or not if his team can overcome those high expectation that this team is, because all signs are pointing that this team can definitely make a run back to MLS Cup, and this team can also make a run back to the CONCACAF Champions Cup as well. Will they do it? We'll find out as the season goes along. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video. And if you're a Whitecaps fan, what do you think is the MVP, disappointment, young player to watch, what went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.